Are you using the classic clamshell exercise to work your patient's gluteus medius? If so, muscle activation data measured with surface EMG might make you reconsider that exercise, or at least think about at which stage of the program it makes sense to use it. The clamshell is simple, doesn't require any equipment, and can be used from the early stages, but not all its variations generate the same level of activation. In fact, between the least effective and the most effective option, there's an approximate difference of 60% in maximum voluntary contraction. And when we're talking about the stimulus for the gluteus medius, that changes everything. The gluteus medius is key for stabilizing the pelvis in the frontal plane. When it doesn't function properly, issues such as pelvic drop, knee valgus, gait abnormalities, iliotibial band syndrome, patellofemoral pain, or hip and knee injuries in athletes can arise. That's why it's not enough just to prescribe a gluteus medius exercise. You need to know whether that exercise actually activates the muscle you want to work. And this is where EMG allows you to check what's happening in each patient. The most effective variation is the clamshell in quadruped position, with approximately 80% MVC of the gluteus medius. This activation is above the usual threshold for generating strength adaptations, making it a very interesting option when the aim is to significantly strengthen the muscle. In the quadruped position, the angle of work changes due to the position of the hip, and the demand for pelvic stabilization increases, although it requires good control to avoid compensations with the lumbar area or the trunk. Secondly, there's the clamshell in standing position, with around 70% MVC. This variation introduces single leg balance and is closer to real functional situations, such as walking, running, or changing direction. It can be a useful progression when the patient already has good control over the floor-based variations. Thirdly, there's the clamshell with side plank with an activation of approximately 40% MVC. It's an intermediate option because it combines work of the gluteus medius with trunk stability. Next is the classic clamshell in sideline position, probably the most commonly used in clinic, but with only 25% MVC. This doesn't mean it's useless, but its purpose should be clearly defined. It can be useful in the initial stages to teach the pattern, improve tolerance, and start with a low demand. However, if the aim is to significantly strengthen the gluteus medius, it's probably not enough. Lastly, the clamshell with glute bridge reaches approximately 20% MVC in the gluteus medius because the bridge shifts much of the demand to the gluteus maximus and the hamstrings. If you're targeting the gluteus medius, it doesn't seem the most efficient option. If you're after the gluteus maximus with an abduction component, it might make more sense. The clinical key isn't to say that some variations work and others don't, but rather to know when to use each one. A logical progression could start with a classic clamshell to teach the pattern, continue with a clamshell with side plank to add trunk stability, and move on to the standing or quadruped clamshell when we're looking for sufficient activation to truly strengthen. But the values from the study are population references, not absolute truths. Two patients can do the same exercise with seemingly similar technique and achieve very different activations. One might truly activate the gluteus medius while another compensates with a tensor fasciae latae, lower back or trunk tilt. Without EMG, that difference can go unnoticed. With EMG, you can see it in real time and adjust the exercise, position or progression according to the individual response. In conclusion, the classic clamshell is popular, but not necessarily the most effective for strengthening the gluteus medius. With 25% MVC, it can be useful at the beginning, but the quadruped and standing variants with activations close to 80% and 70% MVC are much more powerful options when the aim is to build strength. Click here, request information, and learn how to use EMG to verify the actual activation of the gluteus medius in each clamshell variant and prescribe based on data from the very first session.